Hey, dude. Dude? Oh, hi. Have any of you seen my dude? Dude. Dude. Could you help me call her? That's how we call. Can you try with me? All right, on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Dude. Dude. Hey, dude.
Oh, dude!
You're here.
Yeah, I am.
That's great.
Oh, thanks for calling me. I was taking a nap.
It's a good time for naps in the afternoon.
Yeah.
We've got a book to read.
I know. It's so great. In honor of this very special book, I wore my softball jersey from when I was a young person.
Oh.
I was a softball player. Are there any dudes out there who play softball or baseball or soccer or basketball? Dude, did you play sports?
I played a lot of basketball, and I played some badminton, and I played volleyball. And then when I got out of school, I played a lot of ultimate frisbee.
Nice. Dude, ultimate frisbee is mad fun. Well, the reason I bring up sports is because a lot of these sports can be played outside. And I'm just wondering, dudes, where do we play sports outside?
Oh, I know.
Are there any dudes out there who could tell me where we play sports
I
outside?
know. Me. I know.
The dude is down in front with the green.
In a park.
Oh, yes, you are the winner. So in honor of our beautiful parks in Buffalo and Glasgow and all over the world, we are reading a book about parks. Before we start, let's get our materials ready.
Grab your coloring tools and paper.
Let's figure out how this book can teach us using our multiple intelligences. Linguistic intelligence, letting the language of the book teach us new information. Interpersonal intelligence, learning about other people through lessons in the book.
Environmental intelligence, learning about the natural world through the book.
Before we read, let's think about, listen for poetry, because we're going to play with some words. Especially words that describe the 5 senses.
Touch, smell, sight, hearing, and taste.
And maybe even have a think about if you were designing a park, what would you want in it?
I have like 1,000 billion ideas right now.
Hold on to those ideas, dudes, and let's read.
The Man Who Made Parks. The Story of Parkbuilder Frederick Olmsted. By Frieda Wishinsky and illustrated by Zhang. The Buffalo Olmsted Parks Conservancy Incorporated is an independent, not-for-profit community organization that promotes, preserves, restores, enhances, and ensures maintenance of Olmsted-designed parks and parkways in the greater Buffalo area to guarantee Olmsted Park experiences for current and future generations. Close your eyes. Imagine yourself in a city park. Soft grass carpets your feet. Wildflowers sway in the breeze. Towering trees surround you. Once there were no city parks. Many children grew up surrounded by dust and mud, stone and brick. They lived in small, dark, crowded apartments. They played on dirty, treeless streets, dodging horses and garbage. The air crackled with the clatter of hooves and the shouts of vendors. There was no place to escape until a man named Frederick Olmsted changed cities forever. Frederick Olmsted was born in Hartford, Connecticut in 1822. As a young boy, he loved to wander over the rolling hills and valleys of the beautiful New England countryside. His wandering days ended, however, when he was sent away to boarding school. Frederick hated the overbearing schoolmasters and harsh regime and longed to go home. One summer, to his relief, a bad bout of poisoned sumac prevented him from returning to school, He was free to wander again, meandering down quiet country paths lined with brilliant wildflowers, watching cattle graze in the fields, listening to the rustle of trees and the sweet song of birds. Although Frederick hadn't liked the confinement of school, he loved to read and learn. He read books in his father's library, especially those about the magnificent parks and gardens in England. Frederick thought they were beautiful. He became so interested in parks, he suggested his father plant more trees on their property to improve the view. Though he didn't realize it then, Frederick had designed his first park. It would be many years before he did so again. When his formal education ended, Frederick drifted from one career to another. At 16, he became a surveyor, mapping and measuring land. At 18, he worked in a New York import business, sitting on a stool for hours, adding long columns of numbers. At 20, he sailed aboard the clipper the Ronaldson, bound for China. At 24, he worked as a farmer. But none of those professions suited Frederick or made him happy. Then Frederick heard that his adored younger brother John planned to embark on a walking tour of England for his health. Frederick begged to join him. Together they roamed the English countryside, reveling in the beauty of the landscape. Near Liverpool, Frederick viewed his first public park, Birkenhead, the People's Park. He was enchanted by its winding paths, open fields, lakes, bridges, and summer houses. Most of all, he loved the fact that the park was open to all the residents of the city. When Frederick returned home, he wrote a book about his trip to England. He enjoyed writing so much, he left farming and became a newspaper reporter for the New York Daily Times. As a reporter, Frederick traveled to the southern United States, accounts of the terrible conditions arising from slavery. He also wrote articles about the difficulties new immigrants faced in New York City. Not long after, he became a magazine publisher. When his magazine failed, Frederick again was at a loss. What direction should his life take? For years his family had been understanding about his career changes, but he was now 35. He couldn't keep drifting. He had to find a profession that suited him. The question was, what? The answer came through a chance conversation. As Frederick had written in his articles, New York was reaming with immigrants. Many lived in poverty, breathing foul air and living in squalid, crowded, unhealthy tenements. A movement to create a park in the city had begun years before, but had stalled because of arguments about the park's location. Finally, 840 miserable acres in the sparsely populated center of Manhattan were set aside. A few men, including Charles Eliot, were put in charge of organizing the project. In 1857, Frederick met Charles Eliot, by chance, at an inn in Connecticut, and was immediately caught up with the idea of building a park for New York. Finally, New York would have a green space for all its people, rich and poor, young and old, just like beautiful Birkenhead Park in England. "Why don't you apply for the job of park superintendent?" Charles Eliot suggested to Frederick. Charles went on to explain that the superintendent would be in charge of cleaning up the land where the park would be built. The land was a mess. It was rocky and swampy, with pigsties and slaughterhouses everywhere. It was filthy and smelled disgusting, but none of that bothered Frederick. In his imagination, the park's transformation had already begun. When Frederick arrived at the park site to meet his new boss and chief engineer, Egbert Veely, he was brimming with enthusiasm and ideas. But Egbert shared neither. He thought Frederick was an impractical dreamer who would be useless doing real work on real land. To prove his point, he sent Frederick out with a snarly workman named Mr. Hawkins. Mr. Hawkins took Frederick on a hike through the muckiest, muddiest sections of the park site. Frederick hadn't expected a hike and wasn't dressed for one. His clean pants sank deep into the dirt and slime. Mr. Hawkins and the workmen could barely stop themselves from laughing. All Frederick could do was grit his teeth and keep walking. Despite Egbert's attitude, Frederick was determined to succeed at his new position. The next time he visited the site, he wore rough workman's clothes and heavy boots. He organized the men into teams and told them he expected them to work hard. He insisted on hiring more workers and even waded right into the muck and mud to ensure the work was done properly. Soon the swamps on the park site were drained. The pigsties and slaughterhouses were leveled. The land was cleared. No one laughed at Frederick anymore. The workmen respected and admired his good sense and hard work. Now that the site had been cleared, it was time to design the park. The park commissioners wanted something imaginative, original, charming. Where would the design come from? They'd hold a competition. The winner would receive $2,000 and the opportunity to design Central Park. One of the people interested in entering the competition was gifted architect Calvert Vaux. Calvert, an expert on designing buildings, invited Frederick, who knew every inch of the park site, to collaborate with him. Calvert was convinced that together they could design something unique and wonderful. At first, Frederick hesitated. His full-time job as park superintendent was tiring and consuming. He was also concerned that, should he collaborate with Calvert, he'd be competing against his boss, Egbert Ville. Egbert told Frederick coldly that it didn't matter one bit to him if Frederick entered the competition. Egbert was confident that Frederick had no hope of winning. As soon as he heard Egbert's harsh words, Frederick knew what he wanted to do. He would design Central Park with Calvert. The two men worked night after night, drawing on great sheets of paper that covered their table and cascaded to the floor. Sometimes they rode into the park and worked by moonlight, analyzing and measuring the land. Hour after exhausting hour they worked. Sometimes they argued. Frederick envisioned the park as a tranquil place for people to escape the bustle and noise of the city. Calvert saw it as a work of art. Despite their differences, they developed a plan that would bring the serenity and beauty of the countryside to the city. They finished a day before the deadline. All that remained was the decision on the winning design. On April 28, 1858, by a vote of 7-4, Frederick Olmsted and Calvert Vaux were named the official designers of Central Park. Soon the park began buzzing with workmen. Bricks, gravel, grass, soil, and even dynamite were hauled in. Road builders constructed walkways for people, paths for horses and riders, and lanes for carriages. Bridges were built allowing traffic to flow both over and under. Roads were curved, making the narrow land appear wider. The south section of the park was shaped into rolling pastures like an English countryside, while the north end's wilder, more rugged landscape was accented and preserved. And when winter arrived and the lake in the park froze, skaters came to glide and dance on the ice. Soon people everywhere were drawn to the beauty of Central Park. Its fame spread throughout North America, and people clamored for Fred and Calvert to build parks in their cities too. Frederick Olmsted had finally found his career. He was a landscape architect, a term he and Calvert invented to describe their work. Over the years, they designed many parks, including Prospect Park in Brooklyn, a place of stately trees and rolling open fields. After their partnership ended, Frederick continued to design parks alone. One of his boldest designs was the Emerald Necklace in Boston, a whole park system circling the shoreline in a ribbon of green. For over 100 years, people's lives have been enriched by Frederick's dreams. Frederick Olmsted designed many magnificent public spaces all over North America. He designed the sweeping grounds around the United States Capitol in Washington, D.C. He provided plans for majestic Mount Royal in Montreal, Quebec. He cleaned up the rundown area around Niagara Falls and designed a park around its rim. He proposed that beautiful Yosemite Valley in California be preserved forever as a national park. The end.
Remember what we needed to think about while reading the book? Poetry and the five senses and the kind of park you want to design.
So dudes, in the very beginning of the story, there was this beautiful poem that went something like this. Close your eyes. Imagine yourself in a city park. Soft grass carpets your feet. Wildflowers sway in the breeze. Towering trees surround you. It's short, but it brings us right into the story.
Let's write our own poem using the 5 senses to practice linguistic intelligence. We start with the first 2 lines of the poem.
So close your eyes. Imagine yourself in a city park.
Now Dude makes up the next 3 lines of poetry using 3 of the 5 senses that describe parks.
Fresh earth smells fill your nose. The shadows dance on green leaves under blue skies, and birds sing all around you.
Okay, dudes, your turn. Press pause to think, write, and speak. Beautiful poetry, dudes. Now let's stretch our interpersonal intelligence.
So, dude, if you could design a park, what kind of park would you design and what would be in it?
I would want a park that has hills in it and trees, but also spaces to run around. I would really like for there to be a pond and what else do I want in a park? And something that is sort of curved and hilly so that people can sit and watch something. I would call it an amphitheater, which is based on an old Greek form of theater that was outside and sort of naturally formed into the grass and into the hills. So the audience can all sit on the hills and watch some theater down below. And then I would love for there to be an area that has lots of colors and has some art in it.
Great. Hills, trees, and spaces to run, a pond, curved and hilly like an amphitheater for an audience to sit and watch something, colors, and art.
Yes.
Got it.
Okay, dude, what would you like in a park?
Oh, man. Dudes. Okay, I would love tree houses. I need some tree houses in my park. And kind of like the Ewok village in Star Wars, but with bigger windows, because those were kind of dark. I need them to be very open so you can look out, but then they also need to be able to cross from one tree house to the next. And different ways to go up and down the tree houses. So actually, boom, treehouse park. We're going sky high. So it's going to be a park in the canopy of the trees. All right. So the park exists within the branches. So you have swings, and I guess you have to get harnessed in, because if you didn't have a harness, that would be kind of dangerous. But so you'd have swings in the trees, and you could have big platforms, really big platforms in the trees, where you could sit and take in the beauty around you, kind of like a really big pool deck, but it would be in the canopy of the tree. And we talked about frisbee as sports that you play. You could play frisbee, but it would be like from one tree to the next. These would have to be very tall trees. So perhaps this is in the jungle. I'm not sure. But anyways, I think a treehouse park would be really cool.
Then we drew each other's parks. First, the treehouse park.
How did you draw my park? Oh, dude, that is awesome.
So you can see these are like the Ewok houses.
Uh-huh.
And they've got different ways of getting to and from the tree. That's a pulley, and there's a ladder here.
Uh-huh.
And a little bridge. And you see the big pool deck where they're playing frisbee.
Yes, that is cool.
And
That is
this
brilliant.
little dude up here is reading a book.
That's a beautiful treehouse park.
Now, the amphitheater park.
This is your park, dude.
Oh my gosh, I love that park.
So this is the amphitheater, and this is the dudes
Yeah, it is.
on stage together and our audience. And these are all you said we wanted it to be colorful, so I decided that you need a ton of flowers near the pond. And then above the pond is where people can run around and play, but that's where the sculpture park is. So
I love it.
So
Your turn, dudes. Find a friend and take turns asking, how would you design a park? What would be in it? Press pause to draw and share. Excellent work, dudes! Finally, let's stretch our environmental intelligence. A conservationist is someone who works to protect the environment. Frederick Olmsted was a leader in the United States conservationist movement. Let's take a look at conservationist efforts in Scotland and the United States. Welcome to Queen's Park in Glasgow, Scotland. Queen's Park was designed by the renowned landscape architect Sir Joseph Paxton in the 19th century. The park boasts an historic glasshouse, large pond, and Scottish poetry rose garden. The Glasgow City Council and the Friends of Queen's Park support conservation to maintain the park's cultural and environmental heritage. The U.S. National Park Service. There are 419 national park sites and over 84 million acres in the United States and its territories. The Olmsted firm is responsible for playing a role in the conservation efforts that preserve the wildlife and scenery in these parks, ensuring the enjoyment of the natural world for future generations. Learn about conservation efforts in your parks and join in.